Good morning, everyone. I guess I should also say good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you are tuning in from all over the world. My name is Mark Holthe. I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer, and I am the founder of the Express Entry Law Facebook group. Many of you will probably have seen me chiming in as much as possible, answering questions and trying to clarify things. I have started to do more of these EE Live Q&As in order to give me a better option for explaining things in more detail. And I'm also giving you guys a chance to listen to a Canadian English speaker to improve your language skills as well. So it's amazing how many questions people send on how can I improve my language. And I know that there's organizations out there that are designed to try and help people improve their IELTS scores and improve their writing skills and their speaking ability. But I haven't found anything that I really like, and it's really intrigued me. I'm at the stage now where I wonder if there's some partner organization out there that I can join with to try to help all of you improve language skills when you are trying to qualify for Express Entry in Canada. And as many of you already know, language is one of the single most important things that you can have, English language ability, or French for that matter, to immigrate. It can mean the difference between qualifying and not. And as all of you are aware, trying to get up to that CLB 9 at the very least, which then maximizes your transferability points, is extremely difficult, especially writing. I see we've got Sanjeev here. Hi, Sanjeev. How are you doing? All right. So today I wanted to cover in my teaching portion, which is the very first portion of these Q&As, a question that I've gotten a lot, and that is for those lucky people out there, and I consider you lucky, that obtain an ITA and have completed their electronic application for permanent residence, and now you've received your passport back. You've received your passport with your permanent resident visa and your COPR, your confirmation of permanent residence, and now you've got questions about what happens next. And not a lot of people talk about that. Everybody's talking about how do you qualify, how do you get your ITA, and then, what documents are required. And all of those things are discussed a lot, especially in our group. But the reality is, some of you wonder, well, okay, if I go to Canada, how does it happen? What occurs? Some of you have never traveled to Canada. So having been an ex-immigration officer working on the border and having actually processed landing for individuals, I wanted to give you my explanation of what happens. But before we get to that, I want to give a shout out, as I always do, to this awesome little course that I created. And the Canadian Immigration Institute is the sponsor of this EE Live Q&A. And when people go on and they purchase a subscription to my Express Entry complete step-by-step guide to doing it yourself, that helps to provide the resources to allow me to do this and to spend all hours of the night answering your questions, which once again last night I went to bed really late because I was doing that. But anyways, it's amazing how long you can go functioning on about 5 or 6 hours of sleep every night. Anyways, this course right here, I'll put a link in the comment section. But I pour all of my knowledge, all of the experience that I've had doing Express Entry, I have poured it into this little guide. And if some of you have looked on YouTube and have seen these screencasts where people are demonstrating something on their screen or showing you how to do something, that's exactly what I did here. So I used a program called ScreenFlow, and I actually took you with me, like you were sitting over my shoulder here, and I took you on a journey of actually completing everything from registering your MyCIC account to submitting your profile, and I went through systematically every single question. So and I provided commentary. So watch out for this. This is where people commonly make mistakes. Don't forget to do this. This is why you answer this versus this. So that type of thing. So I did that all the way through the profile section, and then with the permission of my clients, I went through the EAPR portion, which you can only access if you've actually received an ITA, and I demonstrate how you do that. And you know what? Anybody can submit a profile. But when it comes to submitting your EAPR, I think really getting your ITA is one thing, that's great. But when it comes to actually immigrating and getting your permanent residence, that EAPR portion, filing the electronic application for permanent residence, is one of the most important things that you have to do correctly, or your whole dream can kind of unravel before your eyes. And I don't know if anyone here watching right now within our within this live video feed has had an experience where they've had an application returned or rejected, but it happens way more than you would ever imagine. And the reality is the government is ruthless. They have a one-touch policy, and if you forget something or didn't include something, you forgot to upload a police clearance that you should have, your reference letter didn't include one of those specific little points that they've asked for. Often it's things like how many hours of work did you work per week. Little things like that can result in your application getting refused. And then you're back at the drawing board. And maybe those comprehensive ranking system points, maybe that pass mark, that level where the draw was issued that you received your ITA, maybe it doesn't get down to that again for a long time. So there's a lot riding on it. And so within our Express Entry Law Facebook group, there's a lot of people that go on there and say, look, you don't need to hire a lawyer. You can do it yourself. All you need to do is go read the government website. Well, yes, that's true. But that government website is very general. And if your situation is very straightforward, in other words, you live in Canada, you work in Canada, you're already exposed to the Canadian culture, you understand how the government speaks. In other words, if you're from a different country and you're trying to read instructions on the Canadian government website, well, without that cultural context even almost, it's difficult to decipher exactly what they're asking you to do. And so if you have all those other things going for you, then yes, it might be just simple and straightforward. But I can tell you the number of people that have come to me after having their applications refused or just getting stuck and not knowing what to do, well, as a Canadian immigration lawyer, that's why I pretty much practice exclusively in this area. So with all that being said, this EE guide saves people hundreds of hours of searching through the immigration forms, the government website, like hundreds of hours by the time you get through and start from the very beginning all the way through to getting your PR. And so I give you a complete step-by-step walkthrough right here. So I'm just going to leave that up there for now, but that is, they're the sponsor of, well, that course is the sponsor of these EE Live Q&As. Okay, so a couple other things. Those who are new to this, I have fielded a bunch of questions from you to this email address, mholthe@stringham.ca, with EE Live Q&A in the subject line. So immediately before I started this this video, and I want to apologize because I was a little bit late getting started. I had to help Billy here review one letter for a client who was coming up to Canada right away quick here, who had a criminal record and needed to get things dealt with at the border to allow her to enter temporarily to fly to Europe. And so we were just getting that submission letter from us to the officers on the border, trying to get that cleaned up and done. And that criminal inadmissibility is somewhat of a complex kind of area. So I was just finishing that. So I apologize for delays in getting started with this. All right, let's get started here. So like I said, if you have a question that you would like me to consider, and I can't do all of them, so I have to be selective, this EE Live Q&A is the route that you go. And then some people will say, hey, can I book a consultation or can I hire you? And I will put comments in the comments section with links to how you can book a consultation with me or how you can just hire me to represent you fully, because I love doing that. And it's fun, representing people all over the world. There's not too many lawyers in Canada that can do that. It's awesome. All right, okay, I have sufficiently taken up enough time with this intro. So let's get to it. So you have received a notification in your email saying send your passport in and your photos and confirming basic biographical data for you and your family if you're traveling with your family. So you've got your approval. You send in your passport. Then you get your passport back with your visa. and it's imprinted in there. And then you also get a confirmation of permanent residence document. So right off the bat, two things I'm going to share with you. The first is that that visa does have an expiry date. And many people speculate, well, when does it expire? Is it your passport? What is it? Well, more often than not, and I would say almost always, the expiry on that visa that actually lets you get on the plane and fly to Canada is matched with your immigration medical. And immigration medicals are valid for about a year. And you can kind of judge the expiry date based on that. And it will be listed on your visa as well when you must travel by. And so they usually give you a little bit of time, but it all depends on how fast your EAPR was processed and when you took your immigration medical. So for those of you who are at this stage, you can take a look at your visa when you get it back and you'll know how long you have to travel. So you have to be able to enter Canada by that time. Now, lots of people will say, okay, well, if I enter, do I have to stay or how does this work? Well, I'll get to that in just a second. But just going through step by step, and I can see here the sun is coming out. So let me see if I can tip this. I've got a really glowing face now because of the sun coming out. Now it's shining right down. That's what happens when you do this first thing in the morning. Sometimes the sun affects the lighting. Anyways, don't mind my glowing face. All right, so you have your confirmation of permanent residence and your visa. The next thing you're going to look at and make sure is that there has been no changes to your family composition. In other words, you want to make sure that you haven't gotten married, you don't have another a child that was born. If any of those changes in your family composition occur, you must not go through and complete landing. You must notify immigration that you've had those changes. So if you go through, let's say you decide to get married and you say, okay, I'm getting married. Dear, just wait here back in Pakistan. I'm going to go land and then I'll get set up and then I'll bring you after. And you go through the process and you do not disclose your spouse, you don't tell the government about her or him, and they have not completed an immigration medical, then guess what? You can be forever barred from sponsoring them to come to Canada. So it is critical that if there's any change in your family composition, and once again, that's if you get married or if you have any children, you must notify before you do your landing. So if no changes have occurred and everything on your confirmation of permanent residence looks accurate, then you can board the plane and come. Now, for most of you, you will have to be able to prove your proof of funds, that you have those funds, because the officer, when you land, may ask for them. So a copy of your bank statement. Obviously, you're probably not going to bring, if you're a single person, the $12,300 Canadian in cash with you, but you will need to be able to demonstrate that through your bank statements and things like that. And if you do that, then you get on the plane. So here's what happens. You're flying over the ocean, headed to probably Vancouver for a lot of you. And when you are getting close to the airport, or at least landing, the stewardess or the flight attendant will give you a little card. And that card is what you fill out when you're getting ready to land. And you'll fill out your information and you'll indicate that, at this stage that you are a foreign national because you're not yet a permanent resident of Canada. And then when you arrive at the Canadian port of entry, which in this case would be Vancouver International Airport, and once again I am glowing. Just give me a second. I'm going to lower the blind. Okay, that's a little better. Well, it's a little darker now, but there will be a happy medium. Anyways, I think you can still see me okay. This is the joys of being your own technical expert here. Okay, that's good enough. Excellent. See, just raise and lower the blind. That's all you need. All right. So so when you come in to the, we'll say Vancouver International Airport, you will have your little border card and you'll have your passport ready. You'll have your confirmation of permanent residence ready, and you will present it to the officer. And instantly, these officers will know what you're doing. But at the primary inspection line, the officer will say, okay, you need to go back to the immigration portion. And so the front line, the primary inspection line, is where you first present yourself to the officer. They will then direct you to go back. And so you'll go back behind, Vancouver International Airport. They have a separate section to deal with the more, the involved immigration matters. And it's there that you will actually have the officer review your documents. They'll check to make sure everything's okay. They'll go through the information on your confirmation of permanent residence. They'll check to make sure that there's been no changes in your family composition. So they'll ask you. And it's really important, like I said, that you don't go through that process if you've had a change in your family composition, getting married, having children. And then the officer will essentially make a notation in your passport confirming that your landing date and put a stamp. And I remember stamping those passports. And then they will sign your confirmation of permanent residence. And that will be the day that you become a permanent resident of Canada. So they'll also, one of the things, because you've included a photo and you've taken care of all of that at the front end, once you land, then that's when the timing starts for your permanent resident card. And remember, anyone who wants to leave and re-enter Canada, a permanent resident, must have a permanent resident card. And this is one of the challenges. So it takes time to get that. And I'm just going to pull it up, and I'm going to, right at this moment here, I'm going to flip my screen, and you guys can follow along with me. Okay, well, that's how you book a consult with me, but let's just go right here. And I'm going to blow this up so you guys can see it a little bit easier, and I'm going to full screen it. And let's take a look right now what the processing times are for a PR card. So we'll go here, permanent resident cards. And if any of you are wondering how long does it take to do anything, this is where you go. And I think I can't really blow up the URL here. There we go. Those of you who are on your handheld, you can see that, which is probably 90% of you are on a handheld. Anyways, that you can search the processing times. But let's take a look. So permanent resident cards. Did you submit a PR card application or solemn declaration? I'm waiting for my first card. So that's it. So let's see how long it's taking. 57 days. Okay, so and you can see this was last updated June 16th, which is my wife's birthday, I might add, and we had a wonderful birthday for her. 57 days is how long it's taking right there. So you can see that when you land, you obviously have to provide an address. So the officer is going to ask for that. I'm going to flip back to this now, but 57 days it will take to get your permanent resident card. Now, some people say, well, what if I need to travel? Well, to start with, you want to definitely try to organize yourself so that you will not need to leave until you get your PR card. But if you do, it's not the end of the world. Essentially what has to happen is you then have to apply for a travel document through the visa office where you return to. So if you need to go back right away because there's some kind of an emergency, it's not the end of the world. You are a permanent resident. It's just that you'll need to apply for a travel document at a visa office abroad in order to return back to Canada. But once you have your permanent resident card, then you're good to go. And you can travel. And remember, as a permanent resident of Canada, you have all the rights and privileges of a Canadian citizen except the right to vote. That means competing equally for jobs and for going to school and all of the benefits that come from being a permanent resident of Canada. So that's what happens. Hopefully that was helpful for all of you. One thing I have noticed is that I like to talk probably a little bit too much. And so I'm going to try to keep these a little bit shorter, but do them more frequently. So I have right here the questions, and I don't want to disclose any confidential information here. So I'm going to put my fingers over this right here. Okay, now I'm going to hold this up really careful. Okay, let's get it in the right spot. Okay, see that right there? See that? EE Live. Sorry, you probably can't hear me now. EE Live Q&A. Okay, so there we go. That person sent me an email with a question of general interest to everyone with EE Live Q&A in the subject line. And guess what? I'm answering it here. So if you want to do that, well, if you want to have a question considered, that's how you get her done, at least for the time being. It's getting to the point where I'm getting a little overwhelmed with questions, and I may need to have my virtual assistant assist, and I may start having you send them to her. But for now, you can keep sending them to me. Okay, let's start off. So Giju is a repeat question sender, and here's another question. So, dear Mark, hope you're doing well. Sorry, I have 2 questions. Okay, we'll see what we can do to answer them. My question. Recently, I claimed 15 points for siblings in Canada. To support this, me and my sister is planning to submit birth certificates. I know where this is going. Mother's and father's name in our birth certificates are similar, but in some other documents like my passport, my sister's passport, father's passport, and mother's passport, the name of my father and mother differs. Slight change in spelling. Some has expansions, additional family names. And so will this create a doubt or a problem for my PR application? This is something that happens very frequently. So the Canadian government recognizes that sometimes names are recorded differently or not as accurately as we do here in our country. But notwithstanding that, if you ever have any control to correct those inconsistencies, if you have an ability to go in to your government agency, get those documents corrected or properly modified to make sure that they're consistent, do it. Okay, that's the first thing. If you have any ability to make those changes, do that. If, however, there isn't, then you need to be able to explain. And so one of the questions is, in general, what document needs to be submitted in order to prove that different names belong to the same person? Well, I can tell you that every single person is different, and every circumstance is different, and every country is different. So it's difficult for me to tell you what exactly would work, but you need to be able to explain it. And almost always there's going to be an additional letter of explanation that you're going to include explaining why the names are a little bit different, but they're the same person. Okay? And I also see there's a lot of people here that are sending, putting their comments in here. So I'll just ask you to hang tight for a second. And once I get through these, then I'll try to answer a few questions from our live feed here. So thanks for being with me this morning. All right. The second question here is the recent draw happened after 1 month, and keeping in mind the fact that around 48,000 ITAs have already been issued for 2017, what would be the frequency in which CIC will be conducting draws in the coming days? What's your take on this? And Giju said that they're sitting with a CRS 421. Is it wise to wait for CRS to drop or go with Ontario nomination in 2017? This is one of the most difficult questions for me to answer. Now, one thing I can tell you is that although 48,000 ITAs have been issued, based on my own personal experience, I would say there's probably at least 20% of them that they're going to get their EAPRs bounced because they did something wrong. It may even be higher, to tell you the truth. And of course, people that get their EAPRs refused, they're not going on our Facebook group and saying, "Yay, my application was refused because I made a mistake." You know, they're not. It's going to be people who were successfully through, pounding themselves on the chest saying, "Yes, I did it on my own and I am now a permanent resident. Congratulate me." And I will congratulate them because that's awesome. But the reality is there's a lot of people who do not get through and they're returned right back to the beginning. And so when it comes to the 48,000 that have been given out, that does not mean that means that 48,000 spots are gone. Some are single, some are associated with families, but at the end of the day, these numbers, you have to take them, as we say in Canada, with a grain of salt. In other words, you have to not rely on them as a conclusive, exact description of where the quota is at in terms of being filled for permanent residents each year in Canada. Now, the next question is the 421. We know that we've had a number of draws under that. This most recent one was higher, I think 440s, And remind me, you guys, what was the most recent draw? I don't have it right in front of me. It was 440 some points. Just toss up a comment there and let me know what the comprehensive ranking score was on the last round of invitation. Let's see how fast it takes you guys to do that. Who's going to be the first one to tell me? This is me watching and waiting to see who the winner is. Kanwar, 449. Awesome. Very good. Okay, so you can see that was a fairly high total. But we also hadn't had any draws for a month. And with the addition of the sibling points and the French points, that impacted on things. But I believe, Raza is saying 447. We've got a conflict now. Now I'm going to need other people to tell me. Is it 449 or 447? Who is going to correct Kanwar and Raza? This is the suspense is killing me. Who else can look it up? Do you know what? I may look it up myself here if someone doesn't respond quickly, because I cannot relieve a question and answer. Okay, 449. All right, so Kanwar's got support from Tatiana, Sandra, and Akshay. All right, perfect. So you can see those totals are quite high. And so will it be going down? That's the question. Will it be going down? And I can tell you that I think it will. Now, where you're sitting with 421, Giju, it's difficult to say, because with immigration you have, if you've got an expression of interest from the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, you need to make that decision, right? Because if you do, you have to choose which path that you are going down. And Raza's correcting themselves. No problem, Raza. That's fine. It made it fun. So I can't answer that question. You know, I've always taken the position that if you have an opportunity, you take it, and you don't lose out on any opportunities that you have. And when it comes to immigration, before express entry, I would have people apply through every option that was available because nothing was guaranteed. So, for example, in Alberta, the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program does not participate in express entry. So they do not have an express entry stream. So people who are here in Alberta working have the ability to be sponsored by their employer to become a permanent resident. But it takes a long time. But the one thing you know is that if you meet the requirements, there's a very good chance you will get your nomination from the province of Alberta and you will get your permanent residence. It's just that it will take a long time, upwards of 2 years sometimes by the time you get your nomination. And so do you wait that long and work in Canada, but you're already here, or do you choose to apply through express entry? Well, the good thing with Alberta is that you can go through the Alberta Immigrant Nominee Program and file your express entry together, and whichever one goes through first wins. But when you're mixing programs like the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program's express entry stream, that's when it can get a little bit confusing sometimes because you have to designate. And there was, if you go into the comments on the Express Entry Law Facebook page, you'll see that there was a posting, and I can't remember who it was of you that posted. They said, hey, I got this letter, or I've got this information about the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, and it's an expression of interest letter, and there's a whole bunch of instructions on there. So if you want to read it, you'll be able to see that there are some restrictions in whether or not you proceed and the ramifications it will have on your express entry application, your normal one. So I would encourage you to go back, find that post, and if any of you here know which one I'm referring to, just post the link to that post within the comments. So I'm going to enlist you to help me to do that for everyone else. So it was the person who posted their expression of interest letter. So just put a link in the comment section if you can find that for me. Thank you very much. Okay, so so Giju, you're going to have to just make that determination yourself. And like I said, I will always take something that's given to me that I know is going to work before giving up on it and trying something else just because I think it's going to result in PR faster. So that's my response there. Okay, this one is someone's calling me. 1 second. Check it out. Unfortunately, I cannot answer my mom's call right now because I'm in a live Express Entry Law Facebook group. So I will have to call my mother back later. Okay. Wow, it's early. She's calling me early this morning. All right. Okay, so this is from OSA. Oh, perfect. There we go. Oh, we've got a link. Oh, that's CIC News. Arul, are you seriously posting David Cohen's a link to his site in my Express Entry Law Facebook group? Arul, delete that. I don't want that expression of interest information. Okay, all right, okay, I'll repent. Okay, you can leave it in there if it's good. Sometimes I'll tolerate Campbell Cohen's stuff if it's good. So I won't give you too much trouble, Arul. So I'm assuming that this gives information about the expression of interest system. And all right, I'll take a look and see if it's worthwhile. Often I would rather just go and have you link back to the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program website itself than a competitor's website. And I have my own issues with the immigration forum as well, but we'll leave that for a separate discussion. All right. Okay, so moving along. Osaz. Okay, Osaz asks, hello, Mark. Oh, okay, maybe I shouldn't read this. This one is a little bit too patronizing. See, you're learning all kinds of different vocabulary for Canada. So, hello, Mark. You've been a guardian angel to most of us and to me specifically. Well, that means a lot, Osaz. It really does. And okay, that's strange. Who kind of chokes up a little bit on a Facebook page, a Facebook Live video? Okay, I'm getting control of myself here. I wasn't expecting that. All right, okay, we're good. We're good. I'm back. Your Q&A sessions are really helpful. Thank you for that. I created my EE profile a few weeks ago, and I had a CRS score of 420. Was pretty heartbroken with the recent draws. Don't be heartbroken. It will be okay. But I have a few queries. I have received another one. Okay, and understand I don't always read these before. I just see EE Live Q&A and I pull them up. So I haven't even read this. Okay, I received a notice of intent from Ontario, a notice of interest from Ontario, and I was considering taking it, but I want to know how fast it is on the average to process. Okay, so understand with the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, I will post a link to the processing times. I haven't looked today to see how long it takes, but I can tell you that it often takes quite a while for those to be processed, but I don't use that as my determiner. I don't. If you have to wait 6 months to get permanent residence or not know if you're going to get permanent residence at all, which would you choose? And I'm not saying that you should accept this and proceed. But the reality is, if there's so many things, so many factors that are outside of your control with the regular process, although I believe it's going to drop down to 420 again, notwithstanding the addition of the points for siblings and the French speakers, there's no guarantee. So we have another phrase in Canada, a bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. In other words, if you have one bird, or you choose to let that one go for the chance to catch two more, well, the one is guarantee and the other two are not. So you have to make decisions and choose wisely. As far as processing, once the processing goes through the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program, then at that stage you're able for your own express entry to go through and get an ITA. Because remember, you do get an extra 600 points for that. But there is no telling exactly with the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. There's no guarantee either that this expression of interest that you receive is going to result in you getting a nomination. Because everybody that's in that range of points, and you know what, if you go to the rounds of invitation, and I'll also, actually anyone, you guys can be my helpers here. I don't necessarily need to go and do it. I want someone to go in and go to the IRCC website and just search. I don't know how intuitive your Google is over in Asia Pacific or wherever you're at, but if you just type in EECIC, because it still operates under the Canadian Citizenship and Immigration Canada domain, type in EECIC rounds of invitation, and then I want you to post the link here in the comment section for me. So if someone could do that, I'd appreciate it. And if you look there, you'll see how many people are still queued up within the 400 to 400 and I can't remember what the range is, 450 range or something like that, or 430. And there's a lot of people. And so everyone within that range group, that range that the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program extends these letters of interest, they are also getting that. And so you have to take that into consideration as well. This isn't a guarantee either. So it doesn't really answer your question, but you just have to take it from that standpoint. A bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. And if you're not in Canada already, would you wait 6 months to know you're going to get you're going to get an ITA, or do you just hope? So that's kind of where it's at. Okay, number 2, so there's 2 questions here. From your expert opinion, do you think people like us who have CRS hovering around 410 to 430 would have any chance of receiving an ITA this year? I obviously am not the one that is setting that pass mark on the rounds of invitations, but I would say yes. And 430, absolutely. 410, we'll see what happens. But I would be very confident if you were sitting at 430 points that you would receive an ITA in the next few rounds. But no one can guarantee. So this is all just a fun speculation, really. Okay. Oh boy. Okay, Osaz is really plugging me. This is really kind. She says, and I suggest members of the Express Entry Law Facebook page who are already in Canada, Alberta, could organize a thank you get-together for you because you have been really amazing. Thanks. That really means a lot to me. And you know what? I'll tell you, the best thing in the world that you can do for me to say thanks for what I'm trying to do, and I hope you guys genuinely feel like I'm not just in this to somehow try and line my pockets with money. That is not the goal. It's actually to try and help people. And I love doing this. As a teacher, a past teacher, I love doing this. But the reality is, yes, this costs money. Even hosting like my Canadian Immigration podcast and having websites and all of these things cost money. So what I would ask is that if there's anyone that expresses an interest in coming to Canada and doesn't know where to start, or anyone, even you guys for that matter, consider subscribing and benefiting from this video guide. So $39 US a month for a subscription. Well, the reality is most people could probably go in and wouldn't even need to stay in any longer than a month. Now, some people may want to have it there as a resource for them as they're waiting with their ITA, or even canceling and then resubscribing once they get their EAPR to then see how you go about that process. But this is one way of saying thank you, and the other is inviting people to this group. Now, I have to approve everyone that's been invited, but you guys, I think, if I'm not mistaken, all have the ability to... Sandra, thank you so much. Check out Sandra. She just posted the link to the rounds of invitations. Oh, and Adela as well. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. So invite people to this group. I want to reach 100,000. Why not? There is me here, and then I look at David Cohen's website and all of the, I don't know how much he spends on marketing. I maybe, I'm positive that some of his staff members are probably secret members of this group watching what I'm doing. So how much do you spend on marketing every year? That's my question. How much do you spend to get the name out so that CanadaVisa.com is number one all across the board? Now, you're never going to speak with David Cohen if you're an individual applicant. Well, I shouldn't say that. Maybe he does work on some files, but I would be shocked. Anyway, so it's all his underlings and his lower staff members. And so when you're going through the process of immigration, if you hire Cohen's site, I'm sure that you will never speak with a lawyer. But that's the model that he has, right? You'll work with the lower level staff members who I'm sure are really good at what they do. But anyways, what I'm trying to say is I've spent a total of $1,500 Canadian through Facebook marketing to get the word out to you guys, to kind of get this kick started, right? And that's it. And why? Because you've been sharing this. And hopefully what you're getting out of this has been useful. But I would love nothing more than to go over 100,000 Facebook members of our private Express Entry Law Facebook group. That would be unbelievable. So anyways, so this is where thanks happens. If you consider subscribing or referring people who would like to, like I poured my heart and soul into that course, and I know anyone that has taken it has given me nothing but positive feedback. All right. Okay, and now I'm going to go to another one here. 2 more quick questions. And holy cow, time flies here. Okay, this is from Dang. I love that name. Dang is a fantastic name. In English, it means it's almost a slang word, and I say it all the time. It's kind of like, oh, dang. That's awesome. Anyways, I love your name, Dang. That's fantastic. Okay, dear Mark, I have a question regarding the letter of experience letter. Okay, that reference letter. I have worked for 3 companies so far, one of which has gone bankrupt. I still keep contact with the owner of the company. He has started another business. Is it acceptable if he signs reference of experience letter for me? CIC stated that the letter must include company's contact information, address, telephone number, and email address, but those information is no longer valid because of the bankruptcy. Is there any way to work this out? Thanks for your time. Reading my email, I really appreciate it. Dang. You are very welcome, Dang. All right, this here I've covered in past Q&As, but it keeps coming up, and so it's important that that we keep covering it because it comes in many forms. Sometimes people have bad relationships with the past employer and they don't want to cooperate. Other times they give a letter, but they only issue one and it's deficient. So there's all kinds of variations of this problem. But I can tell you, after coming back once again from our National Canadian Bar Association Immigration Conference in Toronto, last year, as I indicated, I spoke on the panel with the government officers in Vancouver. This year, there were other people on the panel, but I spoke with the officers, and I can tell you that they still adhere to a very ruthless approach. If you cannot give them exactly what they want, then you run the risk of not getting credit for that work experience. So, in your situation, well, what do? Well, you're fortunate. Even though the company's bankrupt, the owner can still 100% attest to what you did. So, as far as the letterhead, the company might be bankrupt, and you can still put it on the company's letterhead, but it's important that the owner explain fully, look, this is the company, this is our letterhead, we went bankrupt unfortunately, but I can attest to every single one of those little things that are required to support the work experience of Dang. And so then they would sign off on the letter. I would almost also include a sworn statement from that individual confirming that they own the company and that they have full knowledge of everything that transpired, including the bankruptcy. So that's actually not a bad situation. Just have them do the letter and make sure that they disclose fully that the company is no longer in operation, that it went bankrupt, but that they have full knowledge of what you did and your work experience. So you're actually in not a bad situation, Dang. All right, the last one of my emailed in questions. Sanjeev says, "Hi Mark, thanks a lot for spending your personal time and giving us good insight on Express Entry. Does CIC sends ITA for people who created file first?" Okay, I mean on first come first served basis. Example, if the draw is for 415 and though I have same points, is the preference will be given to the person who is elder in EE with same points, then my turn comes. Okay, Sanjeev, no problem. You did a great job of explaining. Now obviously, the way you've written your question is not perfect English, and that's fine. I understood what you asked. And this gives me a good opportunity to also bring up one thing. There's going to be people coming to our group from all walks of life. Some people have a better command of English than others. But there sometimes is a tendency for those of you who speak English a little bit better to feel like you are better than the other people in the group. And I really don't want you to do that. Those of you who have the ability to speak and write English better than others, I want you to be leaders in this group. I want you to be teachers. I want you to help one another and not belittle each other. Just because you have had an opportunity in your life to learn English doesn't mean that you are any better than anyone else. And I, even though I'm born and raised in Canada, am no better than anyone else out there in this group. I was born in Canada, and I'm so grateful that I was. But I could have been born in India. I could have been born in Pakistan, in Nigeria, in Venezuela, right? And so we didn't have any control over that. And with people who want to come to Canada, English is going to have varying levels of ability. And so be respectful, be kind, be helpful, and teach. And I think one of the things that we can do is help with people so that they help people and correct them where needed, but in a kind way. All right? Okay, so Sanjeev, awesome question. And the answer is yes. So those of you who still remember what the question was, I'll rephrase it. So you'll in previous, before this recent change, I guess June 6th, the government issued ITAs to everybody who had that level, that pass score. So for example, the lowest it's been is 413. Well, there may be 300 people that have CRS scores of 413. Well, let's use the one that we have now. Let's use the most recent one, the 449, which I believe was the pass mark. Well, there could have been 100 people that had that. Well, let's say that there were enough people to fill the quota that had higher scores than that, but by the time it got down to, 449, they only needed to pull 50 more people. But there are 300 people that are sitting at that 449 level. Well, what happens now is it all depends on the date that you submitted your express entry profile. So you are correct, Sanjeev. Those who have had a profile in the system longer will rank higher. So whoever's had their profile in the longest will be taken, then the next person, until that quota is filled. And all of the rest that would be at the 449 level, they will have to wait till the next round of invitations. Okay, so there's the answer. All right, you guys, we are at the 46-minute mark, and I promised that I would take a few questions. And one of the challenges I'm experiencing now is that I don't think there's any real easy way to scroll up through this. I'm sorry, guys. I'm going to have to ask you starting now, because the comments are so numerous, I'm going to have to ask you to just repost your question again, okay? So I'm going to start. So Vishal said, could you reply on my comment? Repost it, Vishal, because I'm going to be sitting here for 10 minutes scrolling back through all of the comments. So I see all the awesome thumbs up here, and I think now I'm going to just pull this off so I've got a little bit more space here. Okay, so repost your questions. Okay, Enger says, is Quebec a good place to go to Canada? Hey, someone posted pictures from Quebec. You know, I've been to Quebec City, to Montreal. I actually had the privilege many years ago of going to Montreal to compete in the Olympic trials for Canada for high jump. Now, I'm a little under 6 foot, so not your prototypical high jumper, but I had the privilege of going to Montreal when I was 18, which is, I'll be 45 in October, a long time ago, and it was amazing. Montreal was a beautiful place, and I got it was for the Barcelona Olympics in 1992. And it was a wonderful place. And so I've had immigration conferences in Quebec City. And so if you speak French and you want to go to a wonderful Francophone province, absolutely, it's a wonderful place. And especially those who are getting extra points for French, you know, there's opportunities for you. You can live wherever you want, really. It's just those of you who are nominated by a province, I would never, ever encourage you to go live somewhere else. But to go to that province and you make the province better. Okay. All right, here's some questions. Okay, what is the maximum EE quota limit to be issued ITAs for this year, 2017? A rule. I have no clue. I don't have an answer to that one. It's curious, though. You know what? I may go in and just see what the quota is. I know the last levels planning does set it, and I don't have it offhand. So I'll see if I can drag that information up a rule. Good question. Okay, Diraj, me and my wife's passports are of different addresses. Will it be okay, or shall I have to change my wife's passport? Nope, you don't need to. Different address is completely irrelevant. People can live in different places. It's whether or not you're actually genuine spouses, so it doesn't matter. Some people, let's face it, some people have to renew their passport because they're in Canada and their family's still back home in their home country, so different addresses happens all the time. Okay, Akshay, sir, part-time work counts during bachelor's trade certificate. Oh, now I have to flip back here. See if I can drag this back down. Okay, sir, part-time work counts during bachelor's trade certificate gained before bachelor's. During bachelor's. Well, experience is set out in the ministerial instructions on what is required to count. and you can use part-time. Now remember, in Canada, you don't get credit for work experience that has been gained while you're going to school. So that's the Canadian experience class. But overseas, if you're going to school and working full-time, you can still get credit for that full-time work experience. And so there's also provision for part-time, so the equivalent of part-time. So, but you just have to make sure that you meet all the other requirements. So it can count, yes, as long as you're meeting the equivalent of full-time in part-time work. And it's set out very clearly on the website, and it's going to take me a little bit of time to go through all these comments, but if I can remember, actually, I'll provide you the link right to that section where it shows what part-time means. And if any of you know where that is, post a reply to Akshay's comment showing it. Okay, Atul, good morning, Mark. One of my friends is on temporary foreign work permit right now. However, he didn't complete his study in Canada while he was on study permit. Does it going to haunt him in PR process? Okay, so I'm assuming that he changed to a work permit. Well, ultimately, if you didn't complete your studies, then you're not going to get credit for it. None of those points, the 15 points or otherwise for Canadian educational credentials, actually having completed school. I'm assuming that he switched from a study permit and then went to work, if that's the case. If not Atul, then he's got a whole lot more problems because you're not supposed to be working unless if you're on a study permit. But it seems like he's a temporary foreign work permit, I think is what you're saying right now. Okay, Milind Patel, it has been 4 months that my Saskatchewan Immigrant Nominee Program e-file is in process. 4th of January intake. It has already crossed the timeline mentioned by SIMP. Can you please tell why there has been so much delay in process? Because immigration is completely unpredictable. It's crazy. I never even trust the processing times that are posted. They can change at any time. And it all depends. The reason it's delay is because every province has a limited quota. Most, it's 5,500. Some have a little bit more. But that's all they have for nominations each year. And if there's a ton of people that have applied, then they can only process nominations for so many of them. Guess what happens to the rest? If you're in the queue, they have to slow down processing because they can only push out so many each year. And so you could very well be caught. So I don't trust the provincial nominee programs, the processing times they list. I just don't. So that's why. Okay, Vishal, I'm from India and I'm a barber. I'm planning to go to Canada in Saskatchewan. Hey, guess why everybody's trying to go to Saskatchewan? Because it's one of the very few provinces where you can actually apply on human capital and get through without a job offer. But the number of spots are so low. And Express Entry also has options there. So how many times take it processing time? Hey, Vishal asked the same question. All right. Well, I just answered it. Okay. Alex, is it really possible that draw can go below 400, around 370? Alex. You know, at this stage, it just depends on what the government does. In the future, they can make all kinds of changes, right? So you've seen last December, they made changes. I think it was December of 2016. No longer were people with LMIAs getting 600 points. They reduced that to 50. So then all the people with high human capital like you guys that are maybe not in Canada, now you have a better chance. And the moment they took away that 600 points for LMIAs, the comprehensive ranking system that draws, the totals started to drop. And so you have to appreciate that anything can happen. Then they added points for people with siblings in Canada and points for people that spoke French as well as English. And so that caused the points to go up a little bit. So it's really hard to say. It really is. I remember when the very, very first panel that came and spoke on Express Entry back in 2015, they told us that the sweet spot that they were trying to hit was somewhere between 350 and 450. Well, for the first 2 years of the program, it never even got down to 450. And then now, recently, it has dropped down to 413, which was the lowest. But what it's going to do in the future, unfortunately, that is speculation, and I can't answer that. It would be wonderful, but take a look at how many people are allowed into Canada each year. See where people are ranking right now and how many people are pooled in the queue. And that link to the rounds of invitation was kindly posted by one of our members. Thank you. I think it was Sandra, maybe. I can't remember. But anyways, thank you. So check it out, and you'll see. Once it starts to drop, then probably 100,000 people would then be at your range of 370. And You need to improve your English if it's not maxed out. That's the one thing that you need to do. Okay, let's keep going. My score is 410. I've not received PNP for Ontario yet. Say Chang, I cannot speak to the inner workings of the Ontario Immigrant Nominee Program. For years, it was just a gong show, and I don't even encourage people to use it. So I can't speak to why. Sometimes people who've had their profiles in for a while, sometimes for whatever reason they're not caught by the system. I've heard some people say, they withdraw their profile and then resubmit it. But you don't want to lose that grandfathering. Like your place in the queue at 410, maybe it comes down to 410. And maybe there's 2,000 people at 410 and yours has been in the queue the longest. So it's really kind of a tricky kind of situation. And I would also discourage you from putting multiple profiles in. That's just going to mess things up. Okay, Kath says, I've now been working for almost 3 years, but I have roughly 3.5 years of experience in a tertiary hospital. Will I still qualify if I apply for EE? That's hard to say. I can't answer that, Kath, because I don't know what your position is, in what capacity you worked, like what your skill level was. But I don't understand quite your question. It says working for almost 3 years now. So if it's almost 3 years, then you get credit for 2 years. So yeah, if it's a skilled work that you're doing. All right. There's Sandra. She's also got media and notices 2016. Thanks for that useful link, Sandra. Okay, so our rule says that he believes that the maximum ITA for the year 2017 closes at 72,000 plus, but I'm not sure. And you're right. And like I said with the ITAs, just because those have been issued doesn't mean that all of those people are then getting an EAPR. And remember, at the first part of this year, there's been a lot of people that have had their applications returned that have then had to go back into the queue. Kazar says, is Saskatchewan good? I can't speak to it. As a province, it's a beautiful province. Beautiful. Like I've never seen such expansive fields of grain and a variety of different landscapes. So in the southern part of Saskatchewan, Regina area, it's really flat plains and just beautiful in its own right. And then northern Alberta is where you start to get into more sculpted landscapes and hills and mountains and more trees and forests and so yeah, I love it. Okay, we've got some more here. Okay, Diraj, I'll go just a little bit longer here. I'm at 57 minutes, and I really don't want it to go too long because then people won't ever be able to sit and watch this. I try to make it entertaining. And actually, do you know what? Just to spice things up, I think some of you have already seen this, but I love it. I have to show it again. Check this out. I was in New Orleans this past week, and I have to show you guys this. Watch this guide, okay? Look at that alligator. And that was a marshmallow that he was feeding it. And we are out in the middle of the swamp. So I just had to show you that. It is awesome. Maybe some of you have crocodiles and alligators in your territory, but we do not have gators here in Alberta. So it was so cool, and it was right beside the boat. Anyway, so there's a little comic relief for you just to spice things up a bit. Okay, so back to Diraj. So paid in cash as you worked in your father's family business. Is it okay if I take a letter from employer saying I got paid in cash, or it'll be a problem? Well, at the end of the day, if you have no pay slips, right, nothing to prove it, well, all you have is that letter. So all you can do is provide what you have. That it's always a little bit more difficult when you're working in a family business because sometimes you don't always work full-time hours, 30 hours a week. And that's really what the issue is. And so, ultimately, a family member can issue a letter for you if they were truly your employer, but they need to be able to establish all of those factors that reference letters required. The hours worked per week, the duties performed, this, everything from the skill level to all the factors that they're looking for, your salary, benefits, and whether it was continuous full-time employment. All right, let's see who else we have here. Okay, Sabek. Hey, Mark, I'm going to New Brunswick this September to study for 2 years on a diploma. What do you think about New Brunswick PNP? It's not much talked about anywhere. Well, Sabak, I'll tell you, if you are going to study for 2 years and you've got your study permit, you have tons of options available to you. I'm not sure if you've worked at all or got a skilled, have skilled work, but you know what? International students now are getting special treatment. With the extra points you get for having completed your studies, it really makes a huge difference. And if you study for 2 years, you get an open work permit for 3 years. And then you can gain Canadian work experience, which also gives you more points. So Sabak, you are extremely fortunate, and I want to congratulate you with that. As far as the New Brunswick PNP, these programs change all the time. It's entirely possible by the time you get to Canada that the program has changed, or other ones have canceled, or they've got other streams that have been opened. So it's hard to say right now, looking forward. Okay, Mark, Samita says, does a lecturer need a license to get job offer? Okay, well, this depends. You have to understand that in the public school system, if you are a teacher, it's really difficult. You need to be a permanent resident of Canada. You need to go through your educational credential assessments for the teaching associations across the province. At a college or university level, each of them have their own rules, but you would need to be a permanent resident. But I know individuals that do not have teaching licenses that teach in colleges and universities. So it's not a mandatory component. Okay, you guys, I'm going to have to shut this down. I'm going to go in and try and answer comments a little bit later, but I am going to have to draw this one to a close. It's 1 hour, 1 minute long. So, couple things once again that I'll ask you guys as my friends and as a part of our group. Once again, if you can help me, if there's people out there that are lost and don't know where to turn, point them to this. I will always answer people's questions. I will always point people back to the comprehensive ranking system tool on the website, the Come to Canada tool, which does the eligibility assessments. All of those are wonderful. And I'd always encourage you, if you're providing comments, to link back to the Government of Canada, the CIC or IRCC website. Always link back if you're providing answers, because that gives people information. But the difference here versus just telling in written form, I actually demonstrate and show people how to do it. And it's, like I said, it's $39 US a month. So this is one thing that you could do. And at the end of the day, if any of you have specific questions that you want me to provide legal advice for, I'm happy to spend some time with you. And like I said, my hourly rate it's high because I'm a Canadian immigration lawyer. And I've worked really hard to establish myself as one of the leaders in my field. Now, obviously, I can't say that I'm an expert because the Law Society says I can't. But at the end of the day, I focus almost exclusively in immigration. And so if you have questions, my hourly rate's $400 an hour, which works out for usually half an hour. We can cover pretty much everything. So 30 minutes. And then I charge 5% GST in Alberta, which is actually less than other provinces. You've got a savings there as well. But if you want to engage with me, I'll put a link in the show notes to how you can book a consultation through the firm website. And at the end of the day, if some of you just want complete and total peace of mind, I would be delighted to act for you and to be your personal representative and to submit your application through my own portal. And I've got some wonderful staff members here who are, who work directly with me. But at this stage, folks, I represent you, and that's how I've said it. So thanks so much for being a part of this. Thanks for listening. And if you have questions for future Q&As, put EE Live in the subject and send it to this email, my email, and I'll do the very best I can to answer. Take care, everyone.